There! Stop right there!
Stop!
You stop!
Stop! Stop moving!
Stop moving right now! Stop moving!
Stop!
I can't breathe.
You can breathe just fine.
Stop complaining.
If you're talking, you're
Stop
breathing.
talking, stop complaining, just start breathing. You'll be fine.
These aren't shooting deaths. These are people who die when police are supposed to be using less lethal or non-lethal means.
The type of force that's used is not firearm, where it's not broadcast by the blast of a gun.
A taser or a canine, like choking.
The use of chemical sedatives.
Blocks their airway.
When they handcuff people and put them face down.
Leg restraints, leg shackles, hog ties.
You notice they don't call it non-lethal because they know that it can kill people and does kill people.
The government has not done a good job tracking these things.
That's why we had to go from county to county across the country.
I mean, we must have requested information from hundreds of departments.
It was thousands and thousands of documents.
I looked at a lot of body cam footage, surveillance footage.
600 pages just for one officer.
We knew that there was an incredible amount of work to be done, including down to the level which the Howard Centers did a lot of work on. It was absolutely essential to catapulting us forward. One of the things that we try and do as a global investigations team at AP is really be ambitious. And this project began several years ago with a core group of reporters, and it's expanded out from there, both within AP and, of course, including the Howard Centers.
We're collaborating with the Global Investigations team of the Associated Press on a national investigation looking at people who die when they are being arrested by police.
The Associated Press was really interested in identifying police killings that have gone somewhat under the radar compared to shootings, which get a lot of coverage.
Police were using other tools and tactics that are known in the industry as less lethal.
Really, the United States doesn't know how often that happens and who it happens to and how it happens and what happens after. I mean, these are things that the federal government has been charged with doing, but has really not come through on in terms of letting the public know.
The Associated Press had been working on this project for months before we got involved, and I think that they realized that the scope of the project was so large that they needed extra bodies to make it work. And so they approached the Howard Center at Arizona State University, and they approached us to see if we would be willing to collaborate with them. And we both said yes.
Both Howard Centers at the University of Maryland and here at the Arizona State University worked with the AP during the stage where they were still unearthing incidents that had taken place across the country. We also worked with them during the stage where they were researching departments and officers who were responsible for the incidents that we came across.
Are officers being trained in safe use of tasers and techniques that involve exerting body weight? And if they're not, what could be done differently?
And between the University of Maryland, ASU, and the AP, we submitted thousands of public records requests to try to learn about these incidents, because you hear a lot about officer-involved shooting deaths, but you don't really hear about officer-involved deaths that didn't involve guns. And so that's the sort of piece of the puzzle that this project and our collaboration was trying to contribute.
We have students in the Howard Center who are working as reporters. We also have students in the Howard Center who are working as data journalists.
We started by doing what we did a ton of Public Information Act requests from agencies all throughout the country. We were specifically looking at officer records, so that's law enforcement records. We were also more specifically looking for personnel records for officers. I've sent out probably over 150 to 200.
We were filing public records requests all across the country.
At first I had Kansas and Mississippi.
We looked at a case in Tucson PD.
I was working on Texas for a while.
Missouri, Nevada.
My friend Josie in the project, who's also a reporter, she had New York. We focused on Georgia pretty early on. Florida, they added some from Oklahoma.
The laws about what information you can access differ by state.
Sometimes, a lot of times, they wouldn't even answer back to you, so you have to call them And you have to be very persistent on those types of things. If not, it can, like I said, easily get lost.
We would research the state law like to the T. I think in Mississippi I could have incident reports, so I was very specific about that. And when I wrote my new request, when they rejected the first one, I wrote the section of the state law that said that I could have incident reports, so they couldn't reject me, and sometimes they still did. What we got back really varied by agency and by state to a certain extent, but in some cases we got back like hundreds of pages of documents, even for one officer.
We looked at autopsies, court documents, anything we can get our hands on to just paint a better picture of what really happened in most of these cases.
We also had a data team that would go through that information, and they created like a database out of that, and they created like statistics based on that.
The data for this project was really the result of a lot of different people who were doing a lot of work to extract information from documents and from reporting about these individual cases.
Some of us have been building internal tools to help make the reporting easier for Associated Press reporters. Some of us has been working on data analysis, and the data team has kind of been acting as their data team to try to help them find patterns in the giant data sets that we've kind of compiled.
So there's a question of you've asked for all this information from everywhere across the country, and it's coming in, like, how do you show it internally, right? How do you make use of it so that all the reporters who need to understand what's coming in and kind of how it accumulates have a good view on it?
So we built a database-driven web application that created a page sort of about each death and incorporated information the AP had logged, incorporated the ability to view primary source documents right on the page. If there was video, like body cam video or something, incorporated the ability to view it right on the page.
And then it kind of grew, and we ended up adding different features to make the site more usable and more useful to the AP reporters.
We call it the all-in-one because everything kind of came together in one place.
Part of data reporting is about making information accessible to people that might not necessarily have data skills, whether that's like other reporters that don't have the data skills or to like the general public.
The AP and our students have been building up these data sets. And then the team of students that I was primarily working with, while the data set's being built, begin to ask questions of the data to analyze it.
Just looking at those documents in the form that they came probably wouldn't have told anyone much. But to look at it in a much larger scale really required looking at it through like data analysis.
We primarily use a data programming language called R, and we start with a question, and the question is usually worked out in discussions with somebody from the Associated Press reporting team.
There were individual sessions which really were in many ways revelatory and sort of almost magical, where Sean Mussenden and Mary Dalrymple at Maryland had stood up what they called data office hours.
We would walk into Sean's office, and like the data reporters would sort of be like huddled around his computer, and we would just sort of workshop questions, answer like any questions that the AP reporters might have, like sometimes even like on the fly. So we would like live code sometimes in front of them.
So we'd ask a question like, okay, let's look at where these incidents are happening. Where are these encounters happening?
So we would go in, we would test that question, write some code to answer that question, produce a write-up in a memo with some visualizations, and then share our information with the reporter. That leads to more questions, which leads to more analysis. It's a very circular process, but we produce a lot of these memos and these findings to share with them, and what we've heard is that it's had a really big impact on the reporting process.
It's very, very collaborative, and that's like really important in data journalism, just because like coding can be such like a fraught like experience, and sometimes you want to throw your computer against the wall, but there's collaboration not only between data reporters, but between like the data reporters and the like AP investigative reporters.
Our goal was to have as much involvement as possible, because not only does that represent, helping push the reporting and the project down the line, but also gives the students the most exposure to the types of, learning experiences that we hope they got.
Here, when you're working with really experienced investigative reporters, I think one of the biggest things they saw is you start with something, and then you turn it in, and then it leads to more questions and it evolves. And the work is almost never done. It's just at some point you have to publish. The other thing is they learned how to continue to teach themselves how to do things they didn't know how to do. And in that way, that really closely replicates the kind of work they're doing in newsrooms.
This like large scale pattern building and like time series analysis and like isolating specific like departments and looking at like patterns across the entire nation, like that's not possible without like people that are looking at it through a data analysis lens.
Data reporting doesn't happen in a vacuum. It goes with other reporting techniques, but it's a really important way of learning things that can be used to produce stories.
I think our first contact with an officer kind of happened by accident. One of the reporters who had been handling the Public Information Act request, she actually got called by the officer. The officer wanted to know, like, why are you requesting these documents about me?
Now on the Indicom 1018, he is not responding.
And that ended up being kind of their jumping off point for the first interview that we had with an officer.
So sending students out into the field is always a great experience, and because of the pandemic, we weren't able to do that for 2 years. Sending them meant that we were able to talk to family members of people who died in police custody. We were able to talk to lawyers who represented those families. We were able to talk to police officers.
I went with 2 other students to Atlanta and the suburbs, and in some cases we even got to talk with family members of the people who had passed away, which was really meaningful, and I'm thankful we got to do that.
We got to go to Nevada. We spent several days in Las Vegas doing on-the-ground field reporting and talking to attorneys, talking to lawmakers, and most importantly, we actually got to interview the mother of one of these victims who died at the hands of police in Las Vegas. His name was Michael Guillory.
I mean, like reading all these documents, especially like the case files, you know, recounting how someone died, like to a certain extent, you realize that that's what you're reading about every day. But I remember coming back from Georgia and having this moment where, I don't know, it kind of just like sunk in that I had talked with, you know, somebody's dad who had to see his son buried.
And I think that brought it all together for us, and it gave me some meaning as to this is why we're doing this project. Like, this is the real meaning behind this project. We can look at it in terms of numbers, we can look at it in terms of data and records, but at the end of the day, these are all real people, and these are the stories that we're trying to tell.
I think that at the end of the day, this project will help readers across the United States understand the pressures that police face, but also the failures of the system in each state to make sure that people aren't dying needlessly at the hands of police.
Of course, the highest goal is always going to be policy change and, you know, seeing some real changes on the ground so that these deaths are prevented and so that we see the numbers decrease.
I think that it's alarming that there aren't any, you know, Department of Justice or CDC. There's no agency at the federal level actually looking at these cases and collecting data and analyzing the data and trying to revise training or policy in response to what they're seeing in this data. I hope that that changes. I also hope that this project can maybe set a precedent for what universities can do for professional newsrooms, especially when they're taking on a really large-scale investigation like this project has been.
We looked through a huge volume of material, and I think that's part of the reason why it was so important that it was a big team. And that was one of my favorite things, actually, about the project.
I think like student journalists are some of like the most like open-minded people that you will ever meet, and they are more hungry for like answers than I think that a lot of people like initially expect. So to have student journalists with like fresh minds and like a real like love for journalism, like sitting in on a project like this really helps to take it in like new directions.
So I think it's really interesting, specifically this project, to be able to work with professional journalists that are not just in Merrill College. Like you kind of get outside experience with the reporters from AP, and then they trust your information, which is like, it's a lot of responsibility, but it's also, again, it gives you a sense of confidence in what you're doing. And I think that's a really important thing for student journalists to have, is to gain confidence.
This has been a huge learning experience for me. It's been so invaluable to my education here. Like, I'm so glad that I got to be a part of such a great project, and I've had such great mentors here as well.
I think it's, you know, it's really experience money can't buy. If you want to be a great journalist, investigative or otherwise, you want to work and train under great journalists. And so I think that that's what you have at the Howard Centers. I mean, you really do have people who are outstanding. Both, they've shown it when they were, you know, in the media themselves, and they're showing it with their leadership and their, you know, their vision.
The premise of the Howard Center is that we teach the next generation of investigative reporters by having them do national investigations. And baked into the DNA of the Howard Center is collaboration.
I hope the Howard Center continues to do more projects like this in the future, where we are vital members of a team of really skilled investigative reporters doing really important work.
When our students leave here, they are going to leave here with incredible skills that when they walk into a newsroom, most people will not have. That means, you know, knowing how to file public records requests and negotiate to get them. It means knowing how to write an investigative story. It means knowing how to use all of the research tools to make your reporting deeper and richer. It means understanding all of the data tools that can be brought to bear to organize and analyze a massive amount of information. So they will have learned all of those things, and I think that, you know, it will make them incredibly valuable no matter where they end up working.
I think it's, you know, it's an experience that you might not get somewhere else. Just getting to be a part of it really is like a pretty huge opportunity. I wouldn't be the journalist that I am today without having this experience.